There are a lot of people who are suffering under environmental noise, annoying noise, potentially affecting their health or their well-being. And the approach to identify the sources of such annoying noise and the available means to protect the people against that are the topic of today's webinar. My name is Markus Becker. I am moderating this presentation and I am assisted today by our product manager, Greg Schmiedle, who is mainly taking care of your input. On the left-hand side, you see the topics that we have prepared for today. We start with an overview and a kind of classification of typical sound sources. We will then dig deeper into the typical challenges of identifying sound and analyzing it, and also possible protective measures. I have also prepared a practical example and a small presentation for you before I will summarize the key issues of this webinar and add some more hints and tips. At the very end, I will take a look at the questions that have popped in and possibly add some more comments. The whole presentation should take about half an hour. Let us first take a look at typical examples of noise sources that can become annoying. Well, maybe the first thing you would think of are a jackhammer, a chainsaw, air traffic, but it could also be a sports facilities in your neighborhood where people play paddle tennis, as an example, or other sports which are creating annoying noise. All these sources have in common that this is airborne noise, while there are also other sources of annoying noise that are transmitted through the soil, structure-borne noise, typically transmitted via vibrations. This could be stamping on the floor on top of your apartment, or an air conditioning system, or a water tube that is creating annoying sound, or an underground sound that is creating vibrations in the soil and making and that becomes audible and annoying. So let us structurize or classify these potential noise sources. And uh, fundamentally, you can put them in two groups. One is the subtle or quiet noise that may sound a little bit awkward, but imagine you are living in a very nice and silent apartment, and then there is some slightly audible but annoying noise somewhere. Well, this will have a major effect on your well-being, although it is, of course, far away from being illegal, but it has an impact. And the second group is the loud noise, very loud noise that is annoying you. And there we have, of course, the chance to fight it by legal means, and I will come back to that later. Well, unfortunately, I have to start with bad news, because if you're expecting the silver bullet, how to address this problem, if you're expecting a cookbook, how to solve it, I have to disappoint you, that is not available. Actually, the whole process of identifying annoying noise sources and especially also protecting the people against that is quite cumbersome, can frequently take time. It's a complex task. It's not that easy. So all I can do here in this webinar is give you some ideas, some inspiration on how to address this topic, but it will always be a challenging task. Let's start with the subtle noise. Um, the identification of subtle noise sources is typically quite demanding. Mostly it's an iterative process, which means you are looking around, you're identifying a potential source. You have to double check that, you have to verify it. Maybe you will realize that you have been on the wrong path. You have to readdress the topic. So this is typically rather complex procedure. Giving you some examples, air conditioning systems, electric control cabinets can cause such annoying noise, water tubes or equipment in your house, or neighbors, so people stamping voices, music, whatever. These are just examples of sources of subtle or quiet noise. What can you do against that? Very briefly, uh, of course, you can dampen or decouple the sound source. Maybe you can apply some operating restrictions, especially when we talk about electrical installations, or you can improve the sound insulation of your apartment as an example. I will come back to that later. Talking about loud noise sources, here the situation is a little bit simpler because typically the identification is quite straightforward. To find these sources, typically when you hear to that noise, you realize immediately what is the root cause, and then it's just a question about where does it come from. Giving you some examples, construction site, workshops in your neighborhood can also be traffic, cars, trains, or airplanes, but also sports facilities, as I showed on the slide before, paddle tennis as an example, can be also other reasons. And the protection, a little bit similar to the one before. Noise barriers here is a different approach in large scale. Again, operating restrictions or better sound insulation could be a solution of your problem or the problem of your customer. Now, let us take a little bit a closer look on the identification of silent of quiet noise sources. In many cases, the majority of the cases, the root cause is hum or vibrations. So that's the most common problem. And the issue here is that if we look at this schematic graph of a wooden house, we have a source down here on the right bottom corner that is creating vibrations, which go into the structure of this house. And if you take a look at where these vibrations go, it can be that due to resonances, the vibrations are even bigger up here in the top left corner. So the situation can result in a situation where you have noise coming from this area here, top left corner, while the root cause is in the opposite part of your building. And that shows you that it's really sometimes demanding to identify the root cause. Another potential effect can be reflections or standing waves. So that if you're standing in a room and at one location, one spot in this room, you don't hear anything, and moving a couple of meters, you will all of a sudden hear the noise. So where does it come from? This is again making the situation more complex. And the third, maybe less frequent, but still possible problem you may face is the so-called beat frequencies. For instance, you have two devices that are creating vibration or noise, and these two devices are doing that on a almost the same frequency, but there is a slight frequency shift in between. So that will create this frequency shift will create the so-called beat frequency. And the effect is that when you listen to the overlay of these two frequencies, you hear something at a much lower frequency as the original um, frequency of the devices. So you're looking for something else and don't realize in the beginning that the root cause are these two devices. So this gives you an example on how demanding it can be to identify the true problem of your noise. Let us summarize that, how to proceed. It is recommended to first investigate the location and its surrounding, to listen carefully, maybe to sense, to put your ear to the wall and see whether you can find out where is this noise or this vibration coming from. And this is, as I stated already, typically an iterative process. You try to identify something, you verify it, maybe you have to research until you find the root cause. One approach that is also recommendable is that you record the noise and or the vibrations on the spot over time, because it could be that your customer, the person who complains about the problem, tells you that it's only during the nighttime or at specific occasions, and you cannot be there all the time. So you may need to do that to make a recording over time and to analyze it at a later point. And that is what I want to show you here. The analysis would be typically a spectral analysis of the recording, of the sound and of the vibration recording, watching out for hidden patterns. Here, I gave you an example where we have a situation in a room where it is not clear whether the sound is coming from outside or from within the building. So you open the window, you record the noise, you close the window, you compare the situation before with the situation after. Maybe you can learn something from that. This is just one example on how to proceed iteratively to circle in or to get closer to the root cause of the problem. The screenshot, by the way, has been provided by one of our customers. Well, let's suppose you have eventually found the root cause, then you should try to decouple it if possible, or at least to protect your customer against that root cause. But I will come back to that later. Now let's flip over to the second group, the loud noise. What needs to be considered when we are looking or identifying the root cause? What are the challenges? Um, if we are talking about very loud noise, typically you have at least the chance that you can fight it with legal actions. But first, you need to know, of course, what local rules, what applicable laws are available, are applicable in your area at the location where you are having the problem. And there may be differences whether you are in a residential area or in an industrial environment. So you need to know what is the legal situation on site. Next, you need to know the limits, the level limits. What needs to be measured? What are the limits? What could you find out? What is a potential um, approach to go to court? It can be also the statistical distribution. In some countries, the percentiles of the noise plays a role in the legal assessment, or maybe the even most important approach is the tonality or the impulsiveness, which means impulsive noise typically is much more annoying than, let's say, pink noise. So that is another approach you have to follow up um, under the consideration of what is applicable in your area. Last but not least, the time of day or night plays an important role. Typically, the allowed limits are higher during daytime and lower during nighttime, and maybe also during the weekend. So this also has to go into your overall consideration. Next step, analyzing these loud noise sources. Listen to what you hear, observe the surrounding, try to identify where the problem is coming from, measure it, preferably with a class 1 sound level meter. Why? Because when you have to go to court, the court will ask you what measurement device did you use. If you tell them, yeah, I had an app on my mobile phone, then they will say, well, this is not relevant. So you have to typically use a calibrated class 1 sound level meter. And don't forget, also the measurement setup needs to be done correctly. Next, you would analyze the recording by considering the time of day, the tonality, the impulsiveness, and so on. Let me very briefly flip over to one of our software packages, the Data Explorer, because this is a very nice tool with which you can analyze um, long-term recordings. You see, we have a spectrogram down here. Here we have the levels that we have measured over time. And I give you one example. I can use this marker feature by looking for impulsive noise. There are various standards. I just selected one, I tell the system to calculate, to identify and calculate these events, these impulsive events, and then you will see these red bars showing you the impulsive sounds that have occurred during this recording period. And the system, the software, assists you in analyzing these impulsive noises and to tell you whether it is exceeding the legal limit or not, just as an example. So I go back to my presentation. And just also to remind you, it is of course essential then if you do such a measurement and such an analysis that you create a standard compliant report. So the documentation of your measurement and your analysis must be professional, must be done properly so that the court will accept it as a proof. Well, next step, what can we do against annoying noise? And this applies both on subtle noise and loud noise. It's quite obvious. The easiest solution would be to fix or to remove the sound source. Unfortunately, in many cases, this is not possible. Talking about traffic noise, for instance. So what else can we do? Well, in case of machinery noise, as an example, vibrations being created by a heavy machine, we can apply absorbing elements, rubber dampers. They are available on the market in various forms and brands for different uses. So this typically helps a lot to decouple the sound source from the ground. Another approach would be to improve the sound insulation of your apartment, to improve the sound insulation of the windows and doors, which is of course costly. Maybe you succeed to find somebody who pays for that, preferably the creator of the noise, but that would be also an approach. And similar thing, say, applies for noise barriers, large scale solution, typically found along traffic roads. Here again, I guess you need to have a good legal argument to force the creator or the responsible entity to install such noise barriers, but that can help, of course, as well. And talking about legal action, just briefly summarizing what I said before, please study the local rules and laws, carry out the measurement correctly, and make sure that your documentation is done professionally. So let me flip over to the practical example. And this is a true example that was provided by one of our customers. Thanks at this location for the provision of the pictures. We had a problem, or our customer was called by a person who was suffering under humming noise in the penthouse apartment below this roof. Well, it turned out that there have been several serious installation errors on the roof. They had to be fixed, and after fixing them, fortunately, the problem was solved. And I'm going to show you in detail what happened. The first step was to verify whether any of these installations of these instruments, these heat pumps or air conditioners was creating loud noise. Well, the answer was no. Each of them was basically working fine, which you can see here on the measurement result. But it turned out that here we had, for instance, in this case, a coupling problem. This air tube was connected directly to the ground, and the vibrations coming from this air tube so were creating a sound below that needed to be decoupled. Similar situation here, the air conditioner was mounted directly to the concrete floor or ceiling in this case, which is of course a deadly sin. Don't do that, because then all the vibrations from the air conditioner will go directly into the ceiling, creating problem. Similar situation here, although there were some absorbing mats in between, the mounting was not done properly. There were missing screws and so on. So that was another reason. Here we have a nice example of somebody who tried to do it better by applying really nice thick rubber dampers. Unfortunately, the person didn't do it right, because the screw by which the air conditioner was mounted to the damper went through the damper to the concrete ground. So the whole effect of the damper was gone. To do it correctly, you needed to mount the air conditioner to the damper and the damper at a different location to the ground. Then the damper can be effective. Last but not least, inside the building, there was another problem because there was a suspended ceiling within, but the suspension was not decoupled as well. So all the vibrations from the ceiling, from the concrete ceiling, went down to the suspended ceiling. So there was no gain here. And here there had to be taken action as well. You can see there are a lot of typical possible problems. You have to investigate that. You have to keep an open eye and see what could be the reason. It's not a simple answer. I'm giving you a very small example here. It's very simple presentation. It's not possible for me to show that on larger scale, but giving you just the idea. How does it look like? We have in the room next to mine placed a loudspeaker close to the wall. The loudspeaker is driven from the minivator with a 50 hertz tone. And here in my room, I have my XL2 with a vibration sensor, and I can show you the content of the screen, of the XL2 screen on my PC. And this is what I'm going to do now. Flip over to the XL2 Projector Pro. Here you see the noise floor, because right now the loudspeaker is not yet switched on. By the way, the noise that it is creating is not too loud. It's just 65 dB in a small distance. So I will now activate the loudspeaker, and you can see immediately what happens. So here you see this peak jumping up that is coming from that loudspeaker. And I want to also to show you a little bit more about the setup. Here you see on the top side again the FFT, the spectrum, and below you see the webcam. In the middle of the picture, you see this magnetic vibration sensor, which is connected to a radiator, and the transmission of the vibration is coming through these tubes. So the loudspeaker creates vibration of the tubes, and the tubes are forwarding this vibration to the radiator. So you can imagine this area here vibrating at 50 hertz can create annoying noise, although the root cause is in the neighboring room. Switch it off again. So this is a very simple example on how to start an investigation to identify annoying noise. So let me get back to my presentation and summarize the key aspects of what I presented to you. Whenever you are confronted with such a challenge, you need to do it attentively. You need to use your power of observation. You have to take your time. Maybe you have to think outside of the box to find the root cause. In many cases, it's really not that easy as it looks at first sight. Furthermore, what you need, of course, the corresponding equipment. We recommend to use a class 1 acoustic analyzer, because if it goes into a legal case, you have to do the measurement with such a device anyway. A vibration meter is very helpful in many cases, and FFT measurement function as well, because that allows you to pretty precisely identify the original frequency of the sound source, and that may help you again to identify the source itself. A wave file recorder is also helpful. That allows you to record the acoustic sound or the vibration or both, whatever. Well, there's at least one good news. All of these features are available in the XL2. Suppose you have the vibration option installed and the corresponding microphone and vibration sensor. There is an option that possibly may help you, the an acoustic camera. I will not go too much into this detail, but acoustic cameras sometimes can help you to identify the location of a sound bridge or a point where the sound is coming from. Typically, they are better in the higher or mid or higher frequencies, not as usable at low frequencies, but still it is a relevant or possible tool that can simplify your work. And last but not least, although this may sound a little bit awkward, there are cases where the customer who came to you and was complaining about health problems, sleeplessness, whatever, um, in fact, not only suffers under a noise problem, but maybe some persons are very sensitive to RF radiation or maybe some odors or vapors from plastic material. So, in such cases, it is recommendable to get support from an expert for such well being, for such situations, in order to cover the whole picture to solve all the problems your customer is suffering under. Well, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Just one reminder, if you have any issues, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate. Contact us. We are always happy to assist you or our subsidiaries, our local sales partners worldwide. They will also be happy. Just take a look at our website to find your next dealer, your next sales partner, or send us an email, whatever you prefer. We will do our best to support you. If you want to take a look at webinar recordings from previous webinars, here you will see, you can see the link to that website where you find all these webinar recordings. And last but not least, if you have the time, we would appreciate if you could rate us on Google. So let me take a look at the questions that have popped in. Well, I see some questions regarding the technical equipment. Um, Maybe what needs to be said regarding the sensors, starting with the microphones, keep in mind measuring microphones are always omnidirectional. So a measuring microphone is not really suited to help you with the location, with the directivity from where the sound comes from. But of course, it is helping you with the assessment of the sound level, the peak parameters, whatever is necessary for your analysis. Talking about vibration sensors, there are many sensors available. Few of them we have in our portfolio. I showed you one with a magnetic head, but there are also other sensors without magnetic head, which you can stick to a wall or whatever is required, maybe to screw it to a machine. That depends always on the application. Yeah, depends on what you're looking for. And maybe one more comment on the frequency range. Um, in many cases, maybe even the majority of cases, the problem is rather located at low frequencies. So make sure that the analyzer you're using goes below 20 hertz, because some of these sound sources are operating there. And even if we don't hear them with our ears directly, they can have an effect on our well-being. So it is worth to taking a closer look at these low frequencies as well, all because of the distribution or the localization of the sound source is much more difficult in this area than at higher frequencies. Good. I will leave the platform open so that you can continue asking questions, and Greg will stay online. I want to thank you very much for your attention. I hope I was able to give you some ideas, some inspiration to solve such problems. And of course, I would be very happy to welcome you again at one of our future webinars. For the time being, stay healthy, have a good time. Thank you very much, and goodbye.